The afternoon sun was hot in the small town of Oakwood. Marcus Johnson, a 17-year-old boy with autism, sat on the curb outside his home. He wore big headphones that played soft piano music. This music helped him feel calm when the world became too loud and busy for him. Marcus had a hard time with change and loud noises. His doctors said he had severe autism, which meant he saw the world differently than most people. When he felt stressed, he would rock back and forth. This helped him feel safe. His father, Commander James Johnson, a Navy SEAL with 20 years of service, always made sure Marcus had what he needed to be comfortable. Today, Marcus was alone outside. His mother was at work at the hospital where she was a nurse. His father had gone to the store to buy groceries. Marcus was waiting for his dad to come home. He held his favorite stress ball in his pocket, squeezing it as he rocked gently. Mrs. Peterson, who had just moved to the neighborhood last month, saw Marcus from her window. She did not know about his autism. She saw a young black man rocking back and forth on the street corner. He seemed strange to her. She felt afraid and called the police. "There's a suspicious young man outside my house," she told them. "He's acting strange. I think he might be on drugs." The police station sent 2 officers right away. Officer Danvers and Officer Reed arrived in their patrol car with the lights on but no siren. They had not been trained well on how to talk to people with disabilities. They saw what they thought was a young man acting strangely, not a disabled teen listening to music. "Police, stand up with your hands where we can see them," Officer Danvers shouted as he got out of the car. Marcus did not hear them because of his headphones. He kept rocking, his eyes closed as he focused on his breathing like his therapist had taught him. The officers looked at each other. They thought Marcus was ignoring them on purpose. Officer Reed walked up to Marcus and grabbed his arm. Marcus was very surprised. No one had told him anyone was there. He jumped up, scared by the sudden touch. His hand went to his pocket where he kept his stress ball. "He's reaching for something," Officer Danvers yelled. Both officers pulled out their guns. They thought Marcus might have a weapon. "Stop! Hands up!" Officer Reed shouted. Marcus was confused and scared. The world suddenly became too much for him. He tried to back away, still reaching for his stress ball to help him feel safe. His headphones had fallen off in the commotion, and the sudden noise was overwhelming. 3 shots rang out in the quiet neighborhood. Marcus fell to the ground, his stress ball rolling away from his open hand. The soft piano music still played from his headphones on the sidewalk. Mrs. Garcia, who lived next door and knew Marcus well, ran outside when she heard the shots. She screamed when she saw Marcus on the ground. "What have you done?" she cried. "He's just a boy with autism." The officers looked shocked as they realized their mistake. Officer Reed bent down to check on Marcus, but it was too late. The boy was bleeding badly from his chest. Mrs. Garcia ran back to her house and called the Johnson family. Marcus's mother was too far away, but his father answered right away. "James, come quick," Mrs. Garcia cried into the phone. "The police, they shot Marcus. They shot your son." Commander Johnson was only 10 minutes away at the grocery store. He dropped everything and ran to his car. His heart was pounding as he drove home as fast as he could. He had been in war zones. He had faced death many times, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. His son needed him, and every second counted. Commander James Johnson drove like he was in a combat zone. His hands gripped the steering wheel so tight that his knuckles turned white. The 10-minute drive took only 6 minutes. He parked his car halfway on the sidewalk and jumped out, leaving the door open. The scene in front of his house looked like something from his worst nightmares. Police cars with flashing lights, yellow tape, neighbors standing behind the tape, some crying, and in the center of it all, a small body on the ground. His son. Commander Johnson was not in his uniform today. He wore a plain blue t-shirt and jeans, but anyone could see he was military from the way he walked and held himself. 20 years as a Navy SEAL had shaped him. He had been in the most dangerous places in the world. He had seen terrible things, but nothing was worse than this. "That is my son," he said in a voice that was quiet but firm. The officer at the edge of the scene tried to stop him. "Sir, you can't go in there. This is a crime scene." Commander Johnson looked at the young officer. His eyes were cold and hard like steel. "My name is Commander James Johnson, U.S. Navy SEALs. That is my son, Marcus. And you will let me pass." The officer stepped back. Something in Commander Johnson's voice told him not to argue. The commander walked past the tape. Every step felt like walking through deep water. His body wanted to run to his son, but his mind kept him moving steady and calm. Officer Reed was kneeling beside Marcus, pressing his hands on the wounds, trying to stop the bleeding. His face was pale and sweaty. Officer Danvers stood a few feet away, talking into his radio. Both looked up when Commander Johnson approached. "Sir, please stay back," Officer Danvers said. Commander Johnson ignored him. He knelt down beside his son and gently moved Officer Reed's hands away. He had trained in field medicine. He knew how to treat gunshot wounds, but as soon as he saw the injuries, he knew it was too late. Still, he pressed down on the wounds and leaned close to Marcus's ear. "I'm here, son. Dad's here now," he whispered. "Just hold on." Marcus's eyes fluttered open. They found his father's face. A small smile touched his lips. Then the light went out of his eyes. Commander Johnson felt his son's body go still. In that moment, something broke inside him. But on the outside, he stayed calm. He reached up and closed his son's eyes. Then he gently laid his hands at his sides. He took off his own shirt and placed it over Marcus's face and chest. When he stood up, his hands and arms were covered in his son's blood. The two officers stepped back. Everyone watching went quiet. They expected yelling, fighting, maybe even violence. But Commander Johnson just stood there, looking down at his son's body. Then he turned to the officers. His voice was steady and clear. Every word felt like ice. "My son was 17 years old. He had autism. That's why he was rocking back and forth. He was listening to music on his headphones. That's why he didn't hear you. The thing he was reaching for in his pocket was a stress ball, not a weapon." He pointed to the small yellow ball that had rolled a few feet away when Marcus fell. "I want your names. I want your badge numbers. I want the name of your commanding officer. And I want them now." Officer Danvers swallowed hard. "Sir, I'm Officer Thomas Danvers. This is Officer Michael Reed. Our sergeant is Robert Collins. We didn't know he was disabled. We thought he was reaching for a weapon." Commander Johnson looked at them with eyes that had seen war and death, but now they held something new, a father's grief, a father's rage. "You shot first and asked questions later. You killed my son because you were afraid of him, because he was black, because he acted different." The ambulance arrived, its siren cutting through the silence. Two paramedics jumped out and rushed over, but it was too late. Marcus Johnson was gone. Commander Johnson stood aside as they checked his son. He watched as they shook their heads. He listened as they called the time of death. Then he pulled out his phone. "I'm calling my wife," he said to no one in particular. "And then I'm calling my lawyer." The police officers looked at each other. They knew their lives would never be the same again. And neither would Commander Johnson's. Sarah Johnson was helping a patient when her phone rang. She had been a nurse for 15 years at Oakwood General Hospital. She was known for her kind smile and gentle hands. But when she answered that call, her world fell apart. "Sarah," Commander Johnson said, his voice tight. "Marcus is gone. The police shot him. They thought he was reaching for a gun, but it was his stress ball." Sarah dropped the phone. The sound it made when it hit the floor seemed very far away. Her coworker, Nurse Lisa, picked it up and spoke to Commander Johnson. Then she helped Sarah to a chair. "I need to go," Sarah whispered. "I need to see my son." By the time Sarah arrived home, more police cars had come. There was also a black car with a man in a suit. He was from Internal Affairs, the part of the police that investigates when officers do something wrong. Commander Johnson stood talking to him, still shirtless with Marcus's blood dried on his skin. Sarah ran to the yellow tape. An officer tried to stop her. "Ma'am, you can't go in there." "I am his mother," Sarah said, her voice breaking. "That is my son." The officer looked at her nurse uniform. He looked at her face, which was the same shape as Marcus. He lifted the tape and let her through. Sarah walked slowly to where her son lay. The paramedics had covered him with a white sheet. She knelt down and pulled back the sheet just enough to see his face. He looked peaceful, as if he was sleeping. Sarah touched his cheek. It was still warm. "My baby," she whispered. "My sweet boy." Commander Johnson came and knelt beside her. He put his arm around her shoulders. "I will make this right, Sarah," he promised. "They will answer for this." The man in the suit came over. "Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, I'm Detective Wilson from Internal Affairs. I need to ask you some questions about your son." Sarah stood up, suddenly angry. "His name is Marcus. He is 17. He has autism. That is all you need to know right now. We are taking our son home." Detective Wilson looked uncomfortable. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Johnson, but we need to take the body for an autopsy. It's standard procedure in officer-involved shootings. His name is Marcus," Commander Johnson said. His voice was like a knife. "Not the body. And we will come with him." The medical examiner's van arrived. They watched as their son was placed in a black bag and loaded into the van. Commander Johnson insisted on riding in the van. No one argued with him. Sarah followed in her car. At the medical examiner's office, they sat in a cold waiting room. Sarah cried quietly. Commander Johnson sat still as stone. His mind was working, planning what to do next. A young lawyer named Michael Chen arrived. He was from the biggest law firm in the city. "Commander Johnson, Mrs. Johnson, I'm so sorry for your loss," he said. "My firm heard what happened. We want to help you get justice for your son." Commander Johnson looked at him. "Why would your firm care about my son?" Michael Chen sat down. "My brother has autism. When I heard what happened to Marcus, I knew I had to help. My firm will take your case for free." For the first time since Marcus died, Commander Johnson felt a small bit of hope. "We need to move fast," Michael said. "The police will try to control the story. We need to tell Marcus's story first. People need to know who he really was." Sarah wiped her tears. "He loved music. He was learning to play the piano. He was kind to everyone. He was planning to study computer science," Commander Johnson added. "He was brilliant with computers." Michael nodded and made notes. "We need pictures of him. Happy memories. We need to show the world Marcus Johnson was not just another victim. He was a person with dreams and a future." As they talked, news vans gathered outside the medical examiner's office. The story was spreading. "Police shoot unarmed black teen." The headlines did not mention Marcus had autism. They did not say his father was a Navy SEAL. But soon, everyone would know. Commander Johnson would make sure of it. "Call a press conference," he told Michael. "Tomorrow morning. I want to speak to the media myself." Sarah looked worried. "James, are you sure? You're still in shock." Commander Johnson took her hand. "The world needs to know who our son was. And they need to know I will not rest until those responsible are held accountable." By nightfall, the story of Marcus Johnson had reached the national news. The next morning, Commander Johnson stood in the mirror. He had not slept. His eyes were red but dry. No more tears would come. He put on his full Navy SEAL dress uniform with all his medals. 20 years of service had earned him many honors. But today would be his hardest battle. Sarah came into the room. She wore a simple black dress. She held a picture of Marcus in a silver frame. It showed him smiling at his 16th birthday party, wearing headphones around his neck. "Are you ready?" she asked. Commander Johnson nodded. as ready as I'll ever be." They drove to the city hall where the press conference would take place. News trucks lined the street. Reporters stood with cameras and microphones. People held signs that said, "Justice for Marcus," and "Black Lives Matter." Michael Chen met them at the back entrance. "There are hundreds of people out front," he said. "The whole country is watching." Inside, they waited in a small room. The police chief wanted to speak to them before the press conference. "Commander Johnson, Mrs. Johnson," Chief Williams said when he entered. He was a tall man with gray hair. "I want to express my deepest regrets for what happened to your son." Commander Johnson looked at him with cold eyes. "Regrets won't bring Marcus back." Chief Williams nodded. "No, they won't. But I want you to know we are conducting a full investigation. Officers Danvers and Reed have been placed on leave without pay." "That's not enough," Sturra said. "They killed our son. The investigation will determine what happens next," Chief Williams said. "Now, about the press conference. Perhaps it would be better if I speak first to explain the department's position." Commander Johnson stood up straight. At 6'2", he towered over the police chief. "This is not your press conference. This is about our son. We will speak first." Chief Williams looked like he wanted to argue but thought better of it. "As you wish." When they walked onto the stage, cameras flashed. Microphones were pointed at them. Commander Johnson stood tall in his uniform. Sarah held the picture of Marcus. Michael Chen stood slightly behind them. Commander Johnson stepped up to the microphones. The room went quiet. "My name is Commander James Johnson. I have served this country as a Navy SEAL for 20 years. I have fought in 3 wars. I have seen men die in battle. But nothing prepared me for seeing my son die on the sidewalk in front of our home." His voice was strong and clear. He did not shake or stumble over words. "Yesterday at 3:42 in the afternoon, my son Marcus Johnson was shot and killed by police officers. Marcus was 17 years old. He had autism. He was sitting outside our home, listening to music on his headphones. He was reaching for his stress ball when the officers shot him." He paused and looked directly into the cameras. "My son was black. My son was disabled. And my son is dead because of fear and poor training. The officers who shot him did not take time to assess the situation. They did not try to talk to him. They saw a young black man making movements they did not understand, and they shot him." Sarah stepped forward. Her voice was softer, but just as strong. "Marcus was kind. Marcus was smart. He loved computers and music. He wanted to go to college and study computer science. He will never get that chance now." She held up his picture so all the cameras could see. "This is our son. Not a threat. Not a criminal. A boy with his whole life ahead of him." Commander Johnson spoke again. "We are calling for the immediate arrest and charging of Officers Danvers and Reed. We are calling for a complete overhaul of police training, especially when dealing with disabled individuals. And we are establishing the Marcus Johnson Foundation to fight for these changes." Reporters began shouting questions. Commander Johnson held up his hand. "My son died because people were afraid of what they did not understand, because they saw his skin color and his different behavior and made a deadly judgment. This must stop. No other parent should have to bury their child because of ignorance and fear." Chief Williams stepped forward, ready to speak next. But the crowd was chanting now. "Justice for Marcus. Justice for Marcus." The press conference was just the beginning. Commander Johnson would make sure his son's death was not in vain. 3 days after the press conference, Commander Johnson sat in Michael Chen's office. The walls were covered with news stories about Marcus. The case had touched a nerve across the country. People were protesting in major cities. The hashtag Justice for Marcus was trending online. "We have a problem," Michael said, sliding a folder across the desk. "The police union is fighting back." Commander Johnson opened the folder. Inside was a statement from the Police Officers Association. It defended Officers Danvers and Reed. It claimed they followed proper procedure, It mentioned that Marcus had been acting erratically and failed to comply with verbal commands. "They're trying to blame my son for his own death," Commander Johnson said. His voice was quiet but filled with anger. Michael nodded. "They're also digging into your past, both you and Marcus, looking for anything they can use to change the story." Sarah, who had been looking out the window, turned around. "There's nothing to find. Marcus was a good boy. James is a decorated soldier." "That doesn't matter," Michael said. "They'll twist things. They already found out Marcus was sent to the principal's office once last year for having a meltdown in class. He was overwhelmed," Sarah said. "The fire alarm went off during a test. It triggered him." Commander Johnson stood up and paced the room. He had faced enemies in war. He knew how to fight people with guns. But this was different. This was a fight with words and stories and public opinion. "What do we do?" he asked. Michael leaned forward. "We need to stay ahead of them. We have the body cam footage coming tomorrow. The police department doesn't want to release it, but the judge ordered them to give it to us." "Will it help?" Sarah asked. "It should," Michael said. "It will show exactly what happened." The next day, they watched the body cam footage in Michael's office. It was worse than they imagined. The video showed Marcus sitting peacefully. It showed the officers approaching quickly. It showed them shouting at him. It showed Marcus not responding because of his headphones. It showed Officer Reed grabbing him. It showed Marcus's confusion and fear. It showed him reaching for his pocket. And it showed 3 shots fired without warning. Sarah turned away, unable to watch her son die again. Commander Johnson watched the whole thing, his face like stone. When it was over, he spoke one word: "Murder." Michael nodded. "I'm taking this to the district attorney today. They need to file charges." But the district attorney, a man named Richard Wells, was not eager to charge the officers. He met with them in his office later that day. "The video is disturbing," he admitted, "but these officers believed they were in danger." "They created the danger," Commander Johnson said. "They approached a disabled boy without trying to understand the situation. They escalated everything. They didn't give him time to respond." District Attorney Wells sighed. "The law gives officers wide latitude when they feel threatened." "My son was not threatening anyone," Sarah said. "He was sitting on a curb listening to music." They argued for an hour. Finally, Wells agreed to present the case to a grand jury. They would decide if the officers should be charged with a crime. "That's not good enough," Commander Johnson said. "Grand juries almost never indict police officers." "It's the process we have," Wells said. As they left the building, reporters surrounded them. Cameras flashed in their faces. Microphones were pushed toward them. "The district attorney is taking the case to a grand jury," Michael told the reporters. "Do you think that's enough?" A reporter asked Commander Johnson. Commander Johnson looked straight into the cameras. He wanted the whole world to hear his answer. "No, it's not enough. But this fight is just beginning. I made a promise to my son. I will get justice for him." Sarah stepped forward and took her husband's hand. "We are releasing the body cam footage to the public tomorrow. Everyone should see what happened to our son." The reporters started shouting more questions. Commander Johnson raised his hand for quiet. "I have been to war," he said. "I have fought enemies of this country. But I never thought I would have to fight my own country's justice system to get justice for my son. I am prepared to fight as long as it takes." As they walked to their car, people on the street recognized them. Some called out words of support. Others just watched in sad silence. The Johnsons' fight was becoming the nation's fight. The body camera footage of Marcus's shooting went online at exactly noon. By 12:30, it had been viewed 1 million times. By evening, the number was over 10 million. The video was clear. It showed the truth that could not be denied or explained away. News channels played parts of the video, careful to stop before the shooting itself. Experts came on TV to discuss police training. Parents of children with autism shared their own fears. Veterans spoke about Commander Johnson's service record and character. At home, the Johnsons tried to find moments of peace. They sat in Marcus's room, surrounded by his things: his computer, his books about coding, his collection of smooth stones that he liked to hold when anxious. He was afraid of so many things, Sarah said, holding one of the stones. Loud noises, crowded places, thunderstorms, but never the police. We taught him the police would help him if he was ever lost or scared. Commander Johnson put his arm around her. We need to bury our son, Sarah. The funeral was set for Saturday. They expected family and close friends. They did not expect what happened. By 8 in the morning, people began to gather outside the church. First dozens, then hundreds. By 10, when the service was to start, over 2,000 people stood in quiet respect. They came from all over the country: parents with autistic children, veterans in uniform, students from Marcus's school, people who had never met Marcus but were touched by his story. The small church could not hold everyone. Speakers were set up outside so people could hear the service. Inside, Commander Johnson and Sarah sat in the front row. Marcus's casket was closed, covered with white flowers and a Navy flag that Commander Johnson's SEAL team had sent. Pastor Davis spoke first. We are here to remember Marcus Johnson, a son, a student, a young man who brought joy to those who knew him. Commander Johnson spoke next. His voice was steady, but everyone could hear the pain behind his words. My son was the bravest person I ever knew. Every day was a challenge for him. Sounds were too loud. Feelings were too strong. The world was often overwhelming, but every day he faced that world with courage. Sarah could not speak. Her grief was too raw. She sat holding Marcus's favorite blue headphones in her lap. After the service, they drove to the cemetery. The line of cars stretched for over a mile. Police had to direct traffic. At the grave, 7 Navy SEALs in dress uniforms stood at attention. They were members of Commander Johnson's former team. They had flown in from bases around the world when they heard about Marcus. As Marcus's casket was lowered into the ground, the SEALs gave a formal salute. It was an honor usually reserved for fallen soldiers. For Commander Johnson, it was a sign that his military family stood with him. Chief Parker, Commander Johnson's former commander, spoke to reporters after the funeral. Commander Johnson served this country with honor for 20 years. He saved my life twice in combat. If he says his son was wrongfully killed, I believe him, and I stand with him in his fight for justice. That evening, the district attorney called an emergency press conference. The public pressure was too great to ignore. After reviewing the evidence, including the body camera footage that has now been seen by millions, I have decided to bypass the grand jury process, District Attorney Wells announced. I am filing charges directly against Officers Danvers and Reed. Officer Danvers will be charged with second-degree murder. Officer Reed will be charged with criminal negligence resulting in death. At home, the Johnsons watched the announcement on TV. It was their first victory, but they knew the fight was far from over. Charging the officers was just the beginning. They'll make bail, Michael Chen said when he called them, and the trial could be months away. We'll be ready, Commander Johnson said, for however long it takes. That night, as Sarah finally slept, Commander Johnson sat in Marcus's room. He held one of his son's smooth stones in his hand. He had a new mission now. It might be the most important mission of his life. 2 weeks after the funeral, the Johnsons sat in court for the bail hearing. Officers Danvers and Reed sat at the defense table with their lawyers. They wore suits instead of uniforms. They did not look at the Johnsons. The courtroom was packed. The judge, an older woman named Judge Harris, called for order. We are here to set bail for Officers Thomas Danvers and Michael Reed, she said. This is not a trial to determine guilt or innocence. That will come later. The defense lawyers argued that both officers should be released without bail. They had clean records. They had families. They were not flight risks. These officers were doing their jobs, said Mr. Wilson, Officer Danvers' lawyer. This was a tragic accident, not a crime. Michael Chen spoke for the prosecution. Your Honor, these men killed an unarmed, disabled teenager who posed no threat. The video evidence is clear. They should remain in custody until trial. Judge Harris took only 15 minutes to make her decision. She set bail at $1 million for Officer Danvers and $500,000 for Officer Reed. It was higher than usual for police officers, but lower than what the Johnsons had hoped for. The department will pay their bail, Michael told the Johnsons as they left the courthouse. They'll be free within hours. Commander Johnson nodded. He had expected this. When will the trial start? Not for at least 6 months, Michael said. Maybe longer. The defense will try to delay as much as possible. They hope public interest will fade. Outside, reporters waited with cameras and microphones. Commander Johnson had become good at talking to the media. He knew how to stay calm and clear. We are disappointed that these officers will be free while my son lies in the ground, he said, but we trust the justice system will work in the end. As the weeks passed, the Johnsons found different ways to cope with their grief and keep Marcus's story alive. Sarah returned to work at the hospital. Her patients gave her purpose. Commander Johnson took leave from the Navy. He began speaking at schools and community centers about autism and police reform. They also started the Marcus Johnson Foundation. Its mission was to train police officers how to recognize and help people with disabilities. Commander Johnson used his military connections to raise money. Sarah designed training programs based on her experience as Marcus's mother and her medical knowledge. 3 months after Marcus's death, they got a surprise visitor. Governor Wilson came to their house. He was running for re-election and wanted to show support for their cause. I've been following your story, he told them. What happened to your son was a tragedy. I want to help make sure it never happens again. Commander Johnson was skeptical. How exactly do you plan to help, Governor? I'm proposing a new law, Governor Wilson said. The Marcus Johnson Law. It would require all police officers in our state to have 40 hours of training on how to interact with disabled individuals. It would also require all police departments to have special response teams for calls involving mental health issues or disabilities. Sarah looked interested. Who would provide this training? That's where I hope your foundation could help, the governor said. You're already developing these programs. The state could fund them. It was the first time someone with real power had offered to help. The Johnsons agreed to work with the governor on the new law. Meanwhile, the trial date was set for January, 8 months after the shooting. The defense lawyers had tried to move the trial to a different city, claiming their clients couldn't get a fair trial in Oakwood. The judge denied their request. As the trial approached, Commander Johnson received a call from his commanding officer. James, the Navy needs you back, Captain Lewis said. Your leave is almost up. Sir, I can't leave now, Commander Johnson replied. The trial is about to start. I understand that, Captain Lewis said, but there's a situation developing overseas. Your team is being deployed. They need your leadership. Commander Johnson faced an impossible choice: his duty as a SEAL or his duty as a father seeking justice. He had never refused a deployment in 20 years of service. I need time to think about this, he told Captain Lewis. That night, he and Sarah talked for hours. She finally took his hands in hers. Marcus would want you to go, she said. He was so proud that his dad was a hero who helped people. But what about you? What about the trial? Sarah's eyes were sad but determined. I'll be at that trial every day. Michael will be with me. Your SEAL brothers will check on me. And you'll come back as soon as you can. Commander Johnson made his decision. He would deploy with his team. But first, he had a message for the world. He called a press conference. I am being deployed overseas with my SEAL team, he told the cameras. I have served this country for 20 years, and I will continue to serve. But make no mistake, my fight for justice for my son continues. I will be back for the trial, and I will not rest until the Marcus Johnson Law is passed in every state. The nation watched as Commander Johnson, in full uniform, boarded a military transport plane. Some people called him a hero for continuing to serve his country despite his personal tragedy. Others wondered if he was abandoning his fight for Marcus. But Commander Johnson had a plan. Even from overseas, he would make sure no one forgot his son. Part 8. The trial begins. 6 weeks into his deployment, Commander Johnson received permission to return for the trial. He arrived home just 2 days before it was set to begin. Sarah met him at the airport. They held each other tight, drawing strength for what was to come. "How are you?" he asked her. "Getting through each day," she said. "The Foundation has been keeping me busy. We've already trained officers in 3 cities." On the first day of trial, the courthouse was surrounded by media and supporters. The Johnsons walked in together, holding hands. Commander Johnson wore his navy dress uniform. Sarah wore a blue dress, Marcus's favorite color. Inside the courtroom, they sat directly behind the prosecutor's table. Across the aisle, Officers Danvers and Reed sat with their defense team. For the first time since the shooting, they were in the same room with Marcus's parents. Judge Harris entered, and everyone stood. "Court is now in session, in the case of State versus Danvers and Reed," she announced. The prosecutor, Ms. Lopes from the district attorney's office, gave her opening statement. She was clear and direct. "This case is about 2 police officers who shot and killed a disabled teenager without provocation," she said. "The evidence will show that Marcus Johnson was simply sitting outside his home, listening to music, when these officers approached him aggressively, failed to recognize his disability, and used deadly force without justification." The defense lawyer, Mr. Wilson, spoke next. His strategy became clear quickly. "This case is tragic, but it is not murder," he said. Officers Danvers and Reed responded to a call about a suspicious person. When they approached Marcus Johnson, he made sudden movements and reached toward his pocket. The officers believed he was reaching for a weapon. They made a split-second decision to protect themselves and the community. Over the next 3 days, the prosecution called witnesses. The neighbor who had called the police admitted she didn't know Marcus had autism. The medical examiner confirmed Marcus was shot 3 times. An expert on autism explained how people with autism might respond to sudden confrontation. Then came the most difficult moment. The prosecution played the full-body camera footage in court. Even though the Johnsons had seen it before, watching it in the courtroom was overwhelming. Sarah cried silently. Commander Johnson sat rigid, his jaw tight. After the video, Ms. Lopes called Commander Johnson to testify. He walked to the witness stand, swore to tell the truth, and sat down. "Commander Johnson, please tell the court about your son," Ms. Lopes said. For the next hour, Commander Johnson described Marcus, his love of music, his struggles with autism, his dream of working with computers, his gentle nature. He explained the special ways they had taught Marcus to handle stress, including his stress ball. "Marcus was never violent," Commander Johnson said. "Even when overwhelmed, he would retreat into himself, not lash out at others." During cross-examination, the defense tried to suggest that Marcus's behaviors might have seemed threatening to someone who didn't know him. "Isn't it possible that my clients, not knowing your son had autism, might reasonably have misinterpreted his movements?" Mr. Wilson asked. "No," Commander Johnson said firmly. "Professional police officers should be trained to assess a situation before using deadly force. My son was sitting down. He had headphones on. He was clearly not a threat." Sarah testified next. She spoke about raising a child with autism, the daily challenges and joys. She described the special training she and Commander Johnson had given Marcus about how to interact with police if he ever needed help. "We taught him to tell officers he had autism," she said, her voice breaking. "He never got the chance to tell them." The defense team called experts who testified about the dangers police officers face daily. They showed statistics about weapons found during police stops. They argued that Officers Danvers and Reed had followed their training. On the 5th day of trial, the officers themselves testified. Officer Danvers went first. He described responding to the call and approaching Marcus. He didn't respond to our commands, Danvers said. When Officer Reed touched his arm, he jumped up suddenly. Then he reached toward his pocket. I thought he was going for a gun. Did you consider that he might have a disability? Ms. Lopes asked during cross-examination. We didn't have time. Officer Danvers said. Everything happened so fast. Officer Reed gave similar testimony. Both expressed regret for Marcus's death, but maintained they had acted according to their training. After 7 days of testimony, both sides made their closing arguments. The jurors went to deliberate. The Johnsons waited. For 2 days, the jury discussed the case. On the morning of the 3rd day, they sent word they had reached a verdict. The Johnsons returned to the courtroom. Sarah held Commander Johnson's hand so tight her knuckles were white. The officers and their lawyers looked tense but hopeful. Has the jury reached a verdict? Judge Harris asked. The jury foreman stood. We have, Your Honor. The courtroom fell silent. The world seemed to hold its breath. In the case of State versus Thomas Danvers, on the charge of second-degree murder, we find the defendant guilty. A wave of sound swept through the courtroom. Some people gasped. Others cried out in relief. Commander Johnson remained still, his face showing no emotion. Sarah covered her mouth with her hand. In the case of State versus Michael Reed, on the charge of criminal negligence resulting in death, we find the defendant guilty. Officer Danvers dropped his head into his hands. Officer Reed stared straight ahead, as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Their lawyers immediately began talking about appeals. Judge Harris called for order. Sentencing will take place in 2 weeks. Until then, the defendants will remain in custody. Outside the courthouse, supporters cheered when the Johnsons appeared. Reporters pushed forward with questions. Commander Johnson raised his hand for quiet. Today, the justice system worked, he said. But this is not a day for celebration. My son is still gone. 2 men's lives are ruined. There are no winners here. There is only the hope that from this tragedy, real change will come. Sarah spoke next, her voice soft but strong. We want to thank the jury for their courage. We want to thank our community for their support. Most of all, we want to thank Marcus for the joy he brought to our lives. This verdict is for him and for all the disabled children who deserve to live without fear. 2 weeks later, at the sentencing hearing, Judge Harris spoke directly to the officers. You took an oath to protect and serve, she said, but on that day, you failed in that duty. Your actions resulted in the death of an innocent young man who needed your help, not your fear. She sentenced Officer Danvers to 15 years in prison. Officer Reed received 8 years. Both would be eligible for parole after serving half their sentences. As the officers were led away, Commander Johnson surprised everyone by asking to speak to them briefly. The judge allowed it. In a quiet corner of the courtroom, with bailiffs standing nearby, Commander Johnson faced the men who had killed his son. I want you to know something, he told them. I don't hate you. I hate what you did. I hate the system that failed to train you properly. But hating you would not honor my son's memory. Officer Danvers looked up, tears in his eyes. I am so sorry, sir. Not a day goes by that I don't relive those moments and wish I had done things differently. Me too, Officer Reed said. If we had just taken more time. Commander Johnson nodded. Time. That's what Marcus needed. Just a few more seconds to understand what was happening. Remember that when you get out, remember to give people time. 1 month after the sentencing, Governor Wilson signed the Marcus Johnson Law. It required all police officers in the state to receive extensive training on how to interact with disabled individuals. It provided funding for special response teams trained to handle calls involving mental health crises or disabilities. And it required all police departments to review their use of force policies. The Johnsons stood beside the governor as he signed the bill. Cameras flashed. The moment was broadcast live across the country. This law won't bring Marcus back, the governor said, but it will save other lives. It will make sure his death was not in vain. In the year that followed, the Marcus Johnson Foundation grew beyond what the Johnsons had imagined. They developed training programs that were adopted by police departments in 20 states. Sarah became a sought-after speaker on autism awareness. Commander Johnson retired from the Navy to work full-time with the foundation. Other states began passing their own versions of the Marcus Johnson Law. Police academies added extensive training on disabilities. Special response teams became standard in major cities. 5 years after Marcus's death, the Johnsons returned to the spot where he died. A small park had been built there, with a memorial stone that read, "In memory of Marcus Johnson, his life changed the world." Commander Johnson placed a smooth stone on top of the memorial, just like the ones Marcus used to carry in his pocket. He would have been 22 now, Sarah said. He might have finished college. He might have been working with computers like he wanted. Commander Johnson put his arm around her shoulders. He still changed the world, just not in the way we expected. A young police officer approached them hesitantly. "Commander and Mrs. Johnson, I'm Officer Rodriguez. I just graduated from the academy. I wanted to thank you. Your training program was part of our curriculum. Last week, I responded to a call about a young man having a meltdown in a store. Because of your training, I knew what to do. I gave him space and time. I spoke quietly. I asked if he had a comfort item. We resolved the situation peacefully." Sarah smiled through her tears. "What was his name?" "David," the officer said. "He's 14 and has autism. His mother cried when I helped him instead of handcuffing him." As the officer walked away, Commander Johnson looked at the memorial stone again. "That's how we measure justice," he said quietly. "Not just in verdicts and laws, but in lives saved. In changed hearts and minds. In David going home safely with his mother." Sarah took his hand. "Marcus would be proud of what we've done in his name." They stood together as the sun began to set, two parents who had turned unimaginable grief into action. They had not wanted this mission. They would have given anything to have their son back. But since they couldn't change the past, they had changed the future instead. And somewhere, they believed, Marcus was at peace.